Hello friends, welcome to Alkem IAS. Let's continue our Indian Express Demystified series. We will be covering the newspaper of Indian Express from 16 June till 20th June. So let's start. First of all, about myself, I am Dr. Rajesh Kumar Mohan. I have done my MBBS from Government Medical College and Hospital, Chandigarh. I have also worked as Assistant Medical Officer in Indian Ordinance Factory Health Services. So let's start the newspaper. First of all, let's do the 16th June newspaper. The first news is about how Delhi High Court has diluted the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So what is this? Recently what happened was that significant development with regard to UAPA Act happened. So what is UAPA? It is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. It is an act which is used in order to counter the terroristic activities. So it is a little more stringent act, and one peculiar aspect with regard to this act is that the getting bail, it's very difficult here. In fact, bail is an exception. According to this is because of section 43D5. So it is an exception to grant a bail. For granting a bail, a judge needs to provide enough grounds that bail is needed. Because of that, bail is rarely granted. However, in case of Delhi High Court recently, three Pinjara Tod activists, that is Natasha Narwal, wait a second, Natasha Narwal, then Devangana Kalita and Asif Iqbal Tana, they were released from Tihar jail, and certain changes were made with regard to application of UAPA Act. Before going forward, we should know what is Najib case. So it is a case in which Supreme Court said granting a bail to those on whom UAPA Act has been applied would be done by constitutional courts. So what are constitutional courts? They are primarily Supreme Court and High Court. So these courts can grant bail. So we have to remember the Supreme Court Najib case 2020. So only constitutional courts can grant this bail. Now, again, Delhi High Court went a step further. It not only granted a bail, but it passed certain remarks about how the case was handled by the police and investigation done, and also it said that it diluted the act. So how it diluted is that it narrowed the application of UAPA. So now UAPA cannot be applied to those persons whom the legislation never intended to punish. So it has diluted and rather narrowed the application of UAPA. Because of that, only Supreme Court appealed against the judgment in the center has appealed the judgment in the Supreme Court. Here we have to see how the case progresses. The further development in this regard is that Supreme Court has said, yes, there are certain significant changes that are being made by Delhi High Court, but these dilution and narrowing down of UAPA would not be applicable in all other cases. However, bail to these three activists stand. Till the final judgment of Supreme Court comes, the changes that have been made in UAPA because of the Delhi High Court judgment would not be applied in other judgments. So with this, this news comes to end. And now let's move forward with regard to vaccinations. There are certain news that are related to vaccination. First aspect is that from 21st June, so the government came with the policy that now there would be no need of pre-registration, and now on-site registration would be allowed. So that is a significant development. At the same time, head of COVID task force. So Dr. V.K. Paul, he has said that if you compare how many age-wise, what has been the changes with regard to impact of the first wave and second wave? He said there is not a major change. So the similar percentage of children have been affected in the first wave, and similar percentage has happened in the second wave. However, because at this time the peak was higher and the number of cases were bigger, so we saw the cases in children with more frequency. So that is what Dr. V.K. Paul is saying. Next is Dr. N.K. Arora. So he is a head of National Adverse if AEFI. So what is AEFI? AFI committee. So AEFI is adverse event following immunization. So it is a term which is in vague, and it is basically used to denote that any vaccination is followed by certain adverse events. So for that particular reason, AEFI, adverse events following immunization, that this term is applied. So according to Dr. N.K. Arora, there have been first case of death due to COVID vaccination. So death has been reported on account of anaphylaxis. So what is an anaphylaxis is that our body reacts to a foreign antigen with a high allergic response. So this anaphylaxis is sudden results in sudden reduction in blood pressure and person may faint. So this anaphylaxis has happened in one case, and this generally happens within 30 minutes. So that's why uh, after vaccination, you would see that those people who are vaccinated are observed for 30 minutes. So that if any of the event like anaphylaxis happens, then treatment for that particular thing can be given. So that is one case of death due to anaphylaxis. Other cases, like there are certain vaccine produced. So there are certain vaccine, there are some things that are there in vaccine like adjuvants and all these things. So they also produce certain adverse events. For example, of fever it can produce. At the same time, it is a state of anxiety. So anxiety related adverse effects are also produced because people are not aware how this vaccine works, and at times they are very fearful of the situation, whether this vaccination would have certain adverse effects on them or not. So with this, uh, the major news of 16 June is covered. One more explained article is about why monsoon came early. So this year, monsoon in India, that is southwest one, monsoon came a little earlier. The reason because was that there was a cyclone Yas in Bay of Bengal, which helped in early arrival of the monsoons in India. Now let's move on to the next day newspaper, 17 June. So here again the controversy between the Union Minister of Information Technology and Electronics and Information Technology, Ravi Shankar Prasad, and Twitter is going on. This is with regard to safe harbor provisions. So Section 79 of Information Technology Act, IT Act, says that unlike other publishers, so for example, we have newspapers. So these publishers are legally liable for the content they have because they have editorial team and all this thing. However, in case of social media intermediaries like Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram, what happens is that people are allowed to air their opinions on these platforms. So this section 17, so because of those publications, the companies are not held liable because of the presence of this section 79 of Information Technology Act, which says that there would be a safe harbor. What is safe harbor? That anything that happen, any content that is there, uh, then the company would not be legally liable for that. Rather, it would be the individual who would be using the company for, who is be using this platform to do illegal activity. So in this regard, Union Ministry is saying that With these new income tax rules, the information technology rules of 2021, if these safeguards that are required with regard to rules, then those companies who would not be following these rules, their safe harbor provision would be taken away. So there are provisions like there should be a nodal officer for compliance, for 24/7 interaction with law enforcement agencies. uh, so these kind of provisions, if not adopted by these companies, especially significant social media intermediaries, then their protections under Section 79 would go away. And now anything that is published on this platform for that particular aspect, these companies would be held liable. Next news is about post-COVID complications. So in children, we see a frequent post-COVID complication, which is called MISC. So what is multi-inflammatory syndrome of in children? So here what happened is that this is basically an immune overreaction. So it results in certain Kawasaki like manifestations and all these things. Second aspect is that we see COVID toes in children also. So sometimes it also has affect the heart. So remember these are there. So related to COVID, one more news is that Delhi government is planning to train some 5,000 youth as health assistants. So these health assistants would be provided 2 weeks of training so that they can help the frontline workers in case the third wave happens. So that is the Delhi government's planning with regard to the third wave of the pandemic. Next is that government has approved corporatization of OFB. So what is this OFB? OFB is Ordinance Factory Board. So it is one of the oldest organization of the government. Basically, under this board, this is a Government of India department. Within Ministry of Defense, there is Department of Defense Production. Under this, Ordinance Factory Board comes. So this controls some 41 ordinance factories, and these ordinance factories are involved in something in defense related manufacturing of defense related infrastructure. Because it was a Government of India department, there are certain inefficiencies in this board. In order to ensure that better corporate practices are followed, an empowered group of ministers headed by the defense minister himself, Shri Rajnath Singh. So they recommended that the Ordinance Factory Board should be abolished and a corporate entity should be created. So in this regard, 7 new defense PSUs would be created. So what is this defense PSU? These would be public sector undertakings, which would have 100% control, 100% shares holding would be with the government, and this would function in a corporate. In their structure of functioning would be just like a corporate rather than a department. So what is the aim of such a move? First aim is to provide autonomy. So uh, when individual companies like defense PSUs are formed, autonomy would be there for with the management. Because of that autonomy, without interference from the ministry, they can function in a better way. Second aspect is that they would turn into productive and profitable assets. So these it has been found that the Ordinance Factory Board is having so many assets, but it is not using it productively. There are certain inefficiencies there. If a corporate-like structure would be created, then these assets would be more productively and profitably used. Third would be it would allow specialization of assets. So what happens is that now Ordinance Factory Board is dealing with all types of defense manufacturing, be it even clothing or as high as defense manufacturing. So if we have separate defense PSUs for say lower end items and separate defense PSU for higher end item, this would promote specialization in products. And finally, it would enhance competitiveness. The competitiveness would be enhanced because there are now more players would be there in the defense sector. 7 PSUs would be there. Defense PSU already there are certain defense PSUs. Even private sector is also there. So competition would be there. Because of that, the companies would be using their assets in a more productive way. However, there are issues because it would create labor-related issues. In fact, some of these trade unions, they are saying that strike would be done. So in this regard, in order to ensure that welfare of their employees is taken care, so there are close to 70,000 employees in ordinance under Ordinance Factory Board. So these 70,000 employees would be uh, seen as a de facto on a 2-year deputation phase. So they would continue to be treated as central government employees rather than the employees of the PSUs, corporate entity. So for that, they would be seen as central government employees who are on a 2-year deputation on these particular service, these defense PSUs. So that has, and all these pension and other liabilities would be taken care by the government of India. With this, let's move on to the next one. Article is there, neighbors against the virus. So this article, it is detailing how various South Asian countries can learn from each other. So like India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, they can learn from each other with regard to COVID management. Especially there are certain models that have been created which would improve the effectiveness of our response to this virus. One model that is suggested is this norm model, in order to ensure that mask wearing is promoted. How it is done? So first, N means no cost distribution of masks. So the mask should be given free of cost. Second is that O. O means we have to offer information with regard to mask wearing. R means that we have to go for reinforcing the message and modeling enforcement. So reinforcing the message that mask wearing is important. And finally, we have modeling, and so only message, a top-down message would not be helpful in adopting this practice. Rather, these community leaders have to model and reinforce these messages by these community leaders like panchayats, ashas. So these can be done. So let's move on to the 18th June newspaper. So next is with regard to the exam for a class 12 examination. So what was decided by the government was that class 12 examination would not be held. Now there should be a mechanism in order to ensure that some objective criteria are used in order to assess the performance of the students. In this regard, 40 is to 30 is to 30 formula is being adopted. So here 40% marks would be given from all the assessments that is there in class 12, and then 30% from class 11, and then 30% from the board exams of the class 10. After considering all this, the final scores would be given to the students. And this formula has been also adopted by, accepted by Supreme Court. So this is a significant development. Next is that now government has come up with new rules. So it has amended this cable TV network rules. So these initially there were 1994 cable TV network rules. Now they have been amended. Under this amendment, now legal recognition has been given to self-regulatory bodies for television. So there are certain self-regulatory bodies for television. For example, Indian Broadcasting and Digital Foundation, Indian Internet and Mobile Association of India. So these bodies will now be registered with the government. So this is like Press Council of India, something like that. The provisions of something like that would be adopted under this. So next is that there is an article with regard to dignity to the departed. So this in this article, the author is saying that there is a need to provide some legal backing to those who are dying. So he is saying that Article 21 is right to life with dignity. So right to life with the dignity also means that right to life with a right to die with dignity. In this regard, the recently what we saw during COVID second wave was that many dead bodies were floating in Ganga. No proper rites rituals were done. They were buried or cremated without COVID appropriate behavior. So initially, what happened? WHO had come up with various guidelines with regard to how to cremate these bodies, those people who are dying. But these guidelines are not being followed. So there is at the same time in the river Ganga, Uttarakhand High Court had said that these river Ganga is a living entity. So it is also polluting river Ganga. So in order to ensure that these things are taken care and Article 21 is taken care, that there is a strong case that their legal backing should be there in order to ensure that that body management protocol are streamlined throughout the country, and in fact they are implemented. It should be made a legal responsibility for a person. If administration is not following that, then some action should be taken. So there is a need for a law in order to ensure that all these protocols for the cremation of these dead bodies are taken care of. Next is an article titled Against Law in Letter and Spirit. So this is with regard to the demolition and rehabilitation drive that is happening in Aravallis. So in Faridabad district of Haryana, what is happening that there is a village by the name of Khorigaon, and this Khorigaon falls under Aravalli range. So so it comes in an eco-sensitive zone, and now they have made illegal constructions. The people have made illegal constructions there. Now the after winning the case in Supreme Court, now the state and district administration are going for a demolition. And in this regard, the author is saying that this step by the government is against the law in letter and spirit. So why is it saying that? So the right to rehabilitation uh, is a well-established right of all the Jukki dwellers, so who are currently in acute occupation of public land. So, in this regard, there are certain judgments that the author is referring to. One is Sudama Singh case. So, in Sudama Singh case, Delhi High Court says that if there is a denial of benefit of rehabilitation, it results in violation of Article 21. So, surely there should be rehabilitation. Again, in even UN Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights also emphasizes on rehabilitation rights. And again, one more case is Ajay Makan case. And in this, Delhi High Court has detailed how rehabilitation is to be done. It should first involve conducting detailed survey prior to eviction, drawing up a rehabilitation plan, and ensuring that upon eviction, the dwellers are immediately rehabilitated. So in this regard, what we are having the most liberal rehabilitation policies of Delhi government. Our Haryana government is also having a rehabilitation policy, which is 2010 Haryana Urban Development Authority fixed that 2003 would be the cutoff date with regard to entitlements for rehabilitation. But this cutoff date has not been updated with passage of time, and because that this present tragedy is happening, that eviction is happening without rehabilitation. So this goes against law in letter and spirit according to the author. Next is international affairs. So astronauts board Chinese space station module in historic mission. So China is planning to have a space station, Tianhe space station, and for this, China recently sent 3 astronauts on its spacecraft Shenzhou 12. It's which means divine vessel. So this Tihane, it is a strategic mission of Chinese. So here, at present, what we are having, International Space Station is there. So it is led by US, and the other countries are also there, where people, astronauts go and do certain studies there related to science and technology. Now, what is happening is that this International Space Station would be there only till 2024. Afterward, there would be no other International Space Station. So, if Tianhe got constructed by 2022, it would be a big boost to Chinese industry, and other countries would also be using Tianhe space station in that particular case. Next is that with regard to role of animal serum in making of vaccine. So recently what happened is that some people said that is young calf serum is being used in manufacture of these COVID vaccines. Recently, Government of India said that calf serum was not used in manufacture of Covaxin vaccine, and so it's not used there. But calf serum certainly is used in certain other vaccines because there is a relationship of how these viruses are cultured. There is utility of various animals. So animal serums are in fact used for vaccine manufacturing. However, in the case of Covaxin, no calf serum has been used. So that is the Government of India statement. So how these animal serums are used? Generally, what happens is these viruses, they do not grow on their own, so they need a medium. For that medium creation, we used serum, that is blood when RBCs are removed, blood of an animal on which these viruses are cultivated and experiments are done for creation of vaccine, for development of drugs. So in fact, there is a success story of Poonawalla family. So Poonawalla family used to do horse breeding previously. From horse breeding, they graduated on to vaccine development, and now Serum Institute of India is there and is supplying 20% of the world vaccine at present. So there is a clear link between animal serum and vaccine manufacturing. So let's move onwards. Now, 19th June newspaper. So center is having to planning to amend the Cinematography Act. So, Cinematography Amendment Bill draft has been released. Cinematography Amendment Bill. So 2021 draft has been released. So what this draft is saying, there are three provisions. First provision is that what happened is that Karnataka High Court took away center's revisionary power if a certificate has been given by CBFC. So now this bill aims to give center again revisionary powers for any certificate that Central Board of Film Certification gives. Second aspect is, so it is a controversial provision, and in fact, various filmmakers protested against this move. Two more things are there in this bill. One is that it penalizes film piracy, so with jail imprisonment. So those people who are doing film piracy would be given jail imprisonment and fine. And third is now new age-based certification criteria is being suggested. At present, what is happening? We are just having view A, UA. So this kind of classification, now age-based classification certification would be done of the films. So this is a significant development with regard to films industry. And again, sad news is that flying sick Milkha Singh ji, he expired on account of post-COVID complications. And anything fact we have to remember about 1960 Rome Olympic, and in which Milkha Singh represented India, and he was fourth in this in the race. So that is there. At the same time, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has launched a crash course for training 1 lakh COVID warriors. So these crash course would help improve the capabilities and working skills of those COVID warriors who are working in the front line. One more news is with regard to COVID is that Zydus Cadila. So this is a Cadila. So this is a pharmaceutical company. So it's Zycov-2. So this would be the first, if approved, first DNA vaccine for the COVID vaccine, coronavirus, and it is being considered for emergency use authorization. So, and one is explained article, it's very important, how polls are contested. So polls results can be challenged. So recently what happened is that West Bengal Chief Minister has contested, is saying that we should file a petition to challenge the results in the Nandigram seat. How these results of polls are challenged in the courts. So the role of Election Commission of India ends with the time of Form 20. So in Form 20, the election commissioner, the returning officer, he declares the result of a particular constituency. Afterwards, now what happens is that further procedure is as follows. we have to have something called election petition in order to challenge this. Only election petition is the only mechanism through which the election poll results can be challenged in the courts. So these can be filed only in the high courts. So what happens is this has to be done within 40. So this is mentioned, procedure is mentioned in Representation of People's Act 1951. So it says that within 45 days, a person has to file the petition in the High Court, and the court should try to conclude the trial within 5-6 months. But the issue is that sometimes more than 6 months is there. But this 45 days is very important, and after 45 days, no one can file election petition. So what are the grounds for filing election petition? The grounds for filing election petition are given in section 100 of Representation of People Act. So first ground is that the candidate who is not qualified. So at the time of election, a candidate is not qualified, and yet he's contesting. Second is that a candidate is indulging in something called corrupt practices, and these corrupt practices are mentioned in section 123 of our Representation of People's Act. Third ground is that this nomination papers, nomination of the candidate has been approved or disapproved in a wrong way, a wrongful nomination procedure. Fourth is the counting process is flawed, and fifth is that non-compliance with any of the constitutional legal provisions related to elections. All these grounds, a person can file election petition. So what are the four famous cases in this regard? The most famous case is with regard to Allahabad High Court, where the candidature of Srimati Indira Gandhi ji, the then Prime Minister, was challenged by Raj Narayan, and Raj Narayan won that case, and that election was declared null and void. So again, the elections happened in that particular case. So next is editorial titled "Managing Tenterum." So recently something happened with regard to U.S. Federal Reserve's Open Market Committee. So there is a central bank of USA called Federal Reserve, and it has a Federal Reserve Open Market Committee which decides about the interest rates. And so they suggested that in future the rates. So there were certain developments which showed that rates of Federal Reserve may go towards the upside. So because of that, the markets are becoming conscious, and people are worried about of a 2013 incidents where a statement of Ben Bernanke, who was head of the Federal Reserve, resulted in something called taper tantrum. What happened is that he's suggested that the interest rates of the Federal Reserve would be increased because there was mayhem in the developing countries market, and a term called fragile five was coined, in which India was also there. So there was a massive outflow of capital from developing countries to the US. So why this would happen? Because if a central government in a developed country which has a good economic control, so he goes for a increase in interest rate. So what happens is the people will go there and deposit their money there, and all the money that is there in developing market will go. So now, in order to prevent this repeat, all the stakeholders are better prepared. Markets are better prepared now. And second is Federal Reserve is also more cautious with regard to communicating its decision in future. And third, in fact, the central governments of all the countries are on their books, and they know they are focusing on increasing the foreign reserves. So, so they are more relying on foreign reserves. In fact, India's foreign reserves are at a historic high. So that in case of any this eventuality, these foreign reserves can be used. So one more article is that whose party is this? So whose party is it? So this is written by former Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Qureshi. So this is with regard to the Lok Jan Shakti Party, where there is a succession dispute with the Lok Jan Shakti Party. So who will decide whose party is there? So in this regard, Election Commission of India has its big role. So first point is that it cannot take a suo moto. It cannot take a case suo moto. Any of these aggrieved parties have to go and apply for this. And in this regard, Election Commission of India has works under election symbols order of 1968. So this was there, and it was judicially upheld in Sadiq Ali case by Supreme Court. So it is there, and it is a quasi-judicial process. What happens is that the election commission would send a notice to all the factions of the party and ask them, will talk to them, try to resolve the matter. Then if it's not resolved, the final would be that voting would be done, and voting would be done by MPs, MLAs, MLCs, and the office bearers. So in case of, but the issue is that in this particular, there are allegations and counter allegations that office bearers, some people inflate all office bearers. Then in order to settle this, the final thing that is used to decide it is that all the MPs and MLAs, their majority is used in order to test whose party is this. So this is there. Next article is about the climate in Cornwall. So in this article, the author is telling what are the decisions that were taken in the G7 summit that was happened in Cornwall with regard to climate change. So the agenda was there in G7 meeting. This G7 grouping is a grouping of industrialized countries. So there were certain decisions that were they taken. First of all, they decided that they will be collectively go for net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So all these countries, and they called on countries, particularly major emitting countries like China and India, to join as a part of global effort. At the same time, the official development assistance will be contingent upon these all these countries who are declaring that by 2050 they will go for net zero emissions. Fourth decision was that with regard to coal sector. So they said that they stressed that all these international investments would be stopped for coal investment. So this has created problem for developing countries because they are in their phase where they need these coal technologies and other things in order to bring the people above poverty line. So this kind of action would shift the burden from developed countries to developing countries with regard to the actions to be taken for mitigating and adapting to climate change. So that is goes against the principle of common but differentiated responsibility that was highlighted in the Paris Climate Deal also. So the author is saying this step is a regressive step in a way that now the burden is more on the countries who are less responsible for the present climate change crisis. So let's move forward. One more article is there titled Bandaid for Power. So this is with regard to the health of discom. So what is this discom? These are distribution companies for power. So electricity distribution companies. So we had Uday scheme before. Again, what is happening now? Uh, uh, these discoms are asking for rescue package. So it's on similar to Uday. So why this recurring problem of discom is happening? This is because of fundamental problems in the business of discoms and how they are working, and no major reform is happening in their working. So what are the reasons behind the present thing? First is that we are having a paradox. So if we have a bad infrastructure, so right now we have a very poor distribution infrastructure like transformers, and so this infrastructure has high AT&T losses. So aggregated AT&C losses, transfer and collection losses, something like that. The term is there. So if we increase the load, this infrastructure will increase the inefficiency. Right now, government is not investing in infrastructure, rather it is going for electrification of more and more villages. So what there is a huge push for electrification. However, the infrastructure is very old. Because of that, the inefficiencies in the distribution and losses are very high. So this paradox is resulting in inefficiencies in discoms. Second is that what are reforms that were required in Uday, that AT&T losses should be reduced to less than 15% by 2019. That has not been reduced. Right now, 21% AT&T losses are there. The revenues earned and revenue spent has to be neutralized, but still 0.49 extra money rupees for 1 rupee extra is paid by this distribution companies because tariff prices are very low and they are not being revised, especially domestic tariff. Third aspect, the reason why this is happening is that due to the pandemic lockdown, what happened is that commercial building, so the commercial establishments like industries. So what used to happen was that these commercial establishments, the cost of electricity was way more than the domestic supply of electricity, domestic electricity cost. So commercial the money that used to come from commercial establishments for the electricity used to be to cross subsidize domestic electricity consumers. Now during pandemic, all these business activities reduced because of that. Consumption of electricity also reduced in these business establishments. So now there is no money for cross subsidizing the domestic power consumption. So that is the fourth problem is that along the distribution chain. So we have distribution chain, we have a feeder, distribution, transformer, consumer. There is no full metering. So metering is not there. If a metering is not there, how can a person knows where the inefficiency is more? So in order to solve all this problem, we can go for privatization. Second is that we should revise these domestic charges. So these user charges of electricity, they have to be revised upward. And but all these decisions are politically sensitive in nature, and it would require political will to reform this sector. Next one is that we should use this technology. We should put up more metering. So if we have nowhere more inefficiency there, we can go for targeting intervention to resolve those issues. So now let's move on to the 20th June newspaper. So India and Pakistan, one news is that India and Pakistan National Security Advisors are going to meet at the sideline of a SU meeting. So Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting is going to be held. So this would be a first time that NSAs would be meeting after the deterioration of a relationship between India and Pakistan. Next is that now under there is a Juvenile Justice Act. So under this Act of 2015, there is a provision that non-institutional financial assistance would be given to those children who are either orphaned or living with extended family. So the rules for implementation of this kind have been framed, and now in Delhi, a non-institutional financial support would be given to these orphan children or those who are dependent on extended family. And this would be applicable only till 2 children, not beyond 2 children. Finally, the news is about elections in Iran. So recently, in Iran, elections happened for president. So in this regard, the hardliner Ibrahim Raisi won the elections. So the issue is why this is happening, that a hardliner is happening. In Iran, the political system is a little complex. There are certain theocratic elements, there are certain democratic elements. The office of president is a democratic element, but only few people can file, and so there is a vetting process who can who can go for contesting in the presidential elections. So this time the body which decides who would be going for elections, who can contest the elections, they vetted and only hardliners were there. And it was expected that Ibrahim Raisi would be elected as president. There was very low the voter turnout of the 30%, somewhere around 30% voter turnout was there in the election process. Why this has been done by the by the Iranian authorities? Because there is a high chance that there would be a issue with regard to the succession of supreme leader. In Iran, there is someone called supreme leader. At present, Ayatollah Khomeini is the supreme leader. So he's having very old age. So there are chances that there would be succession dispute. So first time succession of a supreme leader and new supreme leader would be elected. So in this regard, authorities want that the process should go very smoothly, and so hardliners are being elected at all places, whether it's at the legislature or at the president. So it is for the smooth continuation of the election of the supreme leader election process. However, so many hardliners everywhere in the Iranian establishments can have repercussions in the international sphere of politics. So with this, I think newspaper from 16th to 20th June comes to an end. And thank you for watching the video.